The Second Amendment of the United States Constitution reads as follows: "A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." The Second Amendment has created considerable debate regarding the amendment's intended scope. On one hand, some believe that the amendment's phrase, "the right of the people to keep and bear arms," creates an individual constitutional right for citizens of the United States. Under this individual right theory, the United States Constitution restricts legislative bodies from prohibiting firearm possession, or at the very least, the amendment renders prohibitory and restrictive regulation presumptively unconstitutional. On the other hand, some point to the language itself, "a well-regulated militia," to argue that the framers intended only to restrict Congress from legislating away states' right to self-defense. Some scholars have come to call this theory the collective rights theory. A collective rights theory of the Second Amendment asserts that citizens do not have an individual right to possess guns, and that local, state, and federal legislative bodies therefore possess the authority to regulate firearms without implicating a constitutional right. Later in this video, I will put that ridiculous theory to rest by explaining the Second Amendment in its entirety. Stay tuned. In 1939, the U.S. Supreme Court considered the matter in the case of United States versus Miller. The court adopted a collective rights approach in this case, determining that Congress could relate a sawed-off shotgun that had moved in interstate commerce under the National Firearms Act of 1934 because the evidence did not suggest that the shotgun has some reasonable relationship to the preservation or efficacy of a well-regulated militia. The court then explained that the framers included the Second Amendment to ensure the effectiveness of the military. This precedent stood for nearly 70 years. Then, in 2008, the United States Supreme Court revisited the issue in the case of District of Columbia versus Heller. The plaintiff in the Heller case challenged the constitutionality of the Washington, D.C. handgun ban, a statute that had stood for 32 years. Many considered the statute the most stringent in the nation. In a 5-4 decision, the court meticulously detailed the history and tradition of the Second Amendment at the time of the Constitutional Convention, proclaimed that the Second Amendment established an individual right for U.S. citizens to possess firearms, and struck down the D.C. handgun ban as a violation of that right. Now let's go over the 27 words of the Second Amendment, almost word for word. "A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed." A well-regulated militia. Let us look at the word regulated for a moment. It does not mean a whole host of written restrictive regulations crafted by lawmakers as it does today. However, it is defined in 1789 and referred to the act of keeping a regulated clock in perfect working order. Regulator clocks, sometimes referred to as pendulum clocks, were invented in the late 18th century in a quest for greater timekeeping accuracy. Well-regulated meant finely tuned. It meant a civilian military force using arms in working order, functioning as expected, and being trained to a very high degree. The next part of the Second Amendment, being necessary to the security of a free state. States were expected to defend themselves against a tyrannical government, foreign or domestic. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. To ensure the ability to form the civilian militia, the people's right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed upon by the varying government they may have to defend against. Notice that the word people, as in we the people, are used and not the words the right of the militia to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. When the word people are used in our founding documents, it means all the people of the United States. The next and very important word here is shall not, and it is used to express a command. For example, you shall not go or you shall not pass. Notice that it does not have the word may, which is used to indicate a possibility or probability. An example is, the right of the people to keep and bear arms may be infringed. Consider if the founders used the word may instead of shall not be infringed. We would not have a Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms today, for it will have already been infringed entirely.